Welcome to the Simply Love Jesus podcast, where we show you what it means to love Jesus and love people. I'm Durante, and I will be the host today. So I'm sure many of you have been hearing about, Chat GPT and AI and all that stuff. So I want to ask you guys, what are your thoughts on that? Would you ever, especially for you, Caleb, would you ever use Chat GPT to create a sermon or something like that? Or I think someone actually used it to create a generic worship song. It was actually kind of dope.
Yeah.
I would say it's a very cool and interesting thing. AI. I think we had a photographers meeting about AI, and we were talking about how it won't necessarily phase out the photographers and videographers, but people that are so heavily graphic designers, it kind of, if they don't get ahead of the curve and learn how to work with it and use it the correct way, it kind of will phase them out. Because with AI, it creates, you've seen it with the trend, and creates different characters and all that kind of stuff. You just pay a subscription to some app. But what I see where AI fails is that it's not perfect. It only does what you feed it. So the creative or
it's not
the
yet.
engineer.
It's not perfect yet.
Well, no, I talked to an AI, crazy and ironically enough, I ran into a person that runs the AIs with his company. It was at a local coffee shop, and we had an in-depth conversation. I asked him all of those questions. He was like, it's really like a college intern. It only does what you tell it to do.
What a slap to all the interns out there.
He's like, it does what you tell it to do, and it does what you feed it. So it's
only as good as you program it to be.
Yeah, it's the same thing as a computer. It's back in the day, 90s, people was like, oh, computer's gonna take over the world. It's like it's only as good as it's programmed to be. Yeah, it's gonna fail. But that's one thing. You just have to learn to work with it, know its limitations. Don't let that be an excuse for a lack of creativity or lack of purpose behind whatever you're creating. But allow that to make you more efficient.
Yeah.
Not be one of the people who's like, oh, AI this, and I'm not going to use it. It's we said in our meeting that the people that learn how to use it now are going to be 5 to 10 years ahead of the people that want to finally succumb to it and learn it 5 years later. It's we already know how to work with it. Yeah. And we already know how to use it to our benefit. I feel like anything that's put on this earth is especially technology-wise and stuff you use, it's from God. God's gifted man into creating those things. And you just have to, it's just like with social media. You just have to use it the correct way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Olivia, you got thoughts?
Actually, I don't have any thoughts on this. Okay, I don't really know a lot about AI, and what was it?
You should try
GHP?
to just GTP? ABC. I don't know.
Oh, Chat GPT.
GPT?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty much like a.
There's a bunch of them out there, though.
Got you. Well,
go ahead.
I'll do my research on it. Yeah. But I don't.
You could just try an AI bot and just try make it write you a song and see how you like it.
Okay, we'll see.
Because it comes up with all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I work for the Renaissance Festival on the weekends. Captain Silly Beard and the whole my beard's purple and a bold purple outfit. It's fun. But one of the things that I do is I have a show where I teach kids how to be pirates at the Renaissance Festival. It's a really cute show, really fun. But one of the things that I do is because you're getting paid to be a Disney character essentially. You're literally getting paid to from the moment the festival starts to the moment it closes, you are in character the entire time. You're trying to transform this whole festival to make it feel like you just jumped back in time to this Renaissance fantasy period. And so everything you do, every person you interact with, you don't break character the whole time. You are in character all the time. And so one of the things that I do is I have a bunch of back pocket little stories. If I ever tell you the time that me and me crew, we have this whole thing. And so I went on the AI thing and I had it tell me a story about Captain Sillybeard and his pirates. And it pulled a whole story that was pretty darn awesome. Wow. And so I've used a couple of them. Yeah, and I was I've saved a couple of those. I'm going to use these. This is great. So that, but then also I like typed in a bunch of stuff. I just wanted to like see what all I could come up with. And I got, of course, like you want to get real spiritual. You're like, all right, let's see how good you got it. All right. So I've typed in what is the gospel? And so it came out with a pretty solid answer. Like I was pretty blown away. Like I said, I was like, just tell me what does the Bible say about this? And it pulls out like some great stuff. I'm like, it's pretty impressive, honestly. Yeah. I think the challenge that will be with like AI in general is diligence. I think the challenge is going to be people trusting just whatever it spits out, that they're not going to put in the due diligence to actually know. Because the only reason I know that it's solid is because I know better than a robot. Like I know the Bible better than this AI thing will ever spit out. Yeah. So I can affirm how consistent, how solid this is. But you got a young kid who's just trying to, type out a paper and just spits it out or whatever. And they just pull out, they have no idea how accurate or inaccurate it is. And so I think the challenge will be to do these things yourself. And I think, it sounds super silly, but you remember the movie WALL-E? Mm-hmm. So I think it puts the temptation, they'll get closer and closer to that kind of reality where people are just, everything is done for them and they just, sit back and do nothing. Mm-hmm. I think that could be a real temptation. I don't know if it'll go to that far of an extreme, but enough of an extreme that it would affect education on some level. Right. So.
So we would love to hear your thoughts about this too.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you think? Are you gonna go iRobot on us?
I would love if someone made an AI called Skynet. I think that'd be dope. That'd be fun. That'd be pretty dope. But I don't know, man. I think AI is going to kind of redefine how we think about. I think it's actually already redefining how we think about relationship, right? And how we connect with other people. Because like songwriting, writing essays, all of those things are actually just ways we build relationship with people. It's like, here's a part of myself that I want to share with you, whether it's intellectual or spiritual or whatever. You're sharing a piece of yourself. So it's like, now we're living in an age where you can ask an artificial intelligence to say, hey, can you write this essay for me? Yeah. And you give it to your professor. And the thing is we know academics are always thinking more. We want to see who you are, what you really think. And it's like, well, now are we in a space where, social media already puts us kind of in a context where we don't share our real selves. Yeah. Right. If we choose to. Right. Yeah. Now it's even further because it's like, all right, now you have this AI that could pose as you. Right. And actually we see that even with the voices too, right? Like, no. You want to hear something real scary? So I work part-time for a local radio station, and we produce commercials and stuff like that. And one of the people, one of the people who was going to record a commercial for us got sick. So one of the producers just took the script for the commercial, threw it into an AI voice bot, and recorded it. And it sounds like you would have no idea that it was just a robot that did it. That's where it got creepy. I was like, it's super creepy.
Where it gets really creepy is then think about then you have like the what's the thing where you copy the faces?
I don't know.
You know what I'm talking about? Where like they're like in movies where they digitally put on
like the the biometric scanner or whatever it's called.
What am I talking about? Where the deep fake, the deep fake technology, where they can literally that's how you get on these modern movies where you have Luke Skywalker and all of a sudden he looks young and they put his whole face on there and everything. So you take that with the voices and everything, you can get into some really dangerous things and a lot of almost blackmailing. You can get into it can get really dangerous really fast if it's not controlled. So anyways, it just hit me.
No, that's real. So, summer is a time where people start, dating and getting out there to get the summer body going and all this stuff. And it's a time for new relationship, right? Spring, summer, a time for new relationship. And so I kind of wanted to just jump off of that and ask you guys, who was your first summer crush? Oh, wow. Yeah. Who was your first summer crush?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Does it have to be somebody that we know?
No, it doesn't have to be.
No. Oh man, who? What? Oh, I remember.
Okay.
I remember my first summer crush. I won't say her name, obviously, but it was this girl that was in our youth group, and we've been friends for a while, and we'd known each other for a while, and it was just like one of those things where we saw each other literally all the time, and then all of a sudden it's a very classic, almost literally like the girl next door kind of thing, whereas literally like you go through puberty, all of a sudden like you have a crush on somebody, but it became this thing where it was like I had a crush on her, but then I didn't because as I got older I would date somebody, but then when that happened she had a crush on me. And then she would hate somebody, and I would have a crush, and that was like a back and forth thing that we didn't talk about. We never actually like dated or anything, but it was like one of those things we talked about later in life. But yeah, I always remember that because it was a lot of back and forth emotions. I remember that a lot. And so I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Wow, that's kind of cool.
Anyone else?
Go ahead,
you just skip right over.
You don't have a summer crush?
I'm still thinking.
So I can't think of an actual summer crush person that we would know or that I would know personally. I'll say mine was more of a celebrity that I had a summer crush on. So no, it's definitely gonna be Zac Efron.
Oh yeah,
Zac Efron.
I was a huge High School Musical girl. Loved it so much. I had the soundtrack. I had a High School Musical birthday.
Love that.
And Zac Efron was my crush
That is our generation.
for a while.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
It's a good analogy.
Yep.
I like that.
Well, literally, because the High School Musical is our generation's Grease. Literally, because the movie is exactly the same.
Right.
It's literally the same plot. It's literally boy who meets this girl when he's away from school, and then he's the really popular boy, comes back and fakes who he is because he likes this girl, but he doesn't want to be outcasted by his friends. But eventually, the girl changes him so that he becomes and does both worlds. Yeah. Like literally,
It's the same.
yeah, it's to the point that some of the scenes are almost exactly the same too. It's uncanny, but I love that. High School Musical is amazing. What about you?
Adrian?
Summer crush. I don't know. I guess when I was in pre-K.
You started early, bro.
Pre-K.
I don't know. This girl.
Some girl, he about juice box.
This girl. I guess it was this girl I liked or had a crush on. It was just doing like. It was like child daycare, or it was some kind of one of those popular child daycare franchises. I don't know. I didn't get her attention, but she was. I think we spent time around each other just as friends, and then like she started like spending more time like with another guy and ride the little bike with him. So I didn't really like that. So I took a pan of like water and dumped it on both of them.
Wow.
You were that kid.
My man had no coping skills.
That was I love that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's the way to handle it right there.
I love that story. That's amazing.
So I want to ask you all a question. I know it seems like, except for you, both of you didn't get a chance to really connect with your summer crush. But what drew you to them? Like why did you have a crush on them in the first place? Even in pre-K.
Oh man, that's a good question. Part of it is just proximity. Mm-hmm. Proximity, familiarity, consistency. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think those, it's just about like consistency. I think just time. Mm-hmm. You just you spend the amount of time you spend with somebody, you grow an attraction towards them, and it was also one of the things where she made fun of me a lot. So that could have also been, that could have also played a role at some level where, someone makes fun. I don't know. I'm sure my therapist will have a great time with that idea. Like, why you fall in love with the people who make fun of you? I don't know. So yeah, but I think the biggest thing is probably just the consistency and proximity, probably. So
That'll do it. Yeah.
shared your crackers.
Same thing he said. There's just close proximity, and you spending day in and day out with that person. You know, in the same group, you're doing obviously possibly working on projects together or doing recess together. So you know, just I was a kid. I was a pre-kid.
So, I mean, considering mine wasn't somebody I knew personally, I guess for me it was just like watching them on TV, obviously, Disney Channel. Just seeing, I guess, like the outgoing spirit. If anybody's ever watched High School Musical, you know, kind of the plot and the idea of it. But seeing, I guess, a guy, you know, he wasn't my age, but at the time, but just seeing him and him, you know, falling in love with the girl, but also like, you know, allowing that to change him in a way. And yeah, like he was the, you know, star athlete, basketball player, whatever, starter of the team. I don't know, was he the captain of the team or something?
Yeah, he was.
And then he falls in love with the girl who's more.
About to answer all that. Yes, he was.
Yeah, it was. So, and then he falls in love with a girl that is more into music and theater and all that stuff. And so he kind of, because of his connection relationship with her, he begins to kind of dive into that realm too, which, you know, he could sing, so wasn't too hard. But he starts to embrace it, I guess, is another
fun
way.
fact, that first movie, he wasn't actually the one who was singing.
Really?
Yeah.
I always wondered that.
Yeah, so it was
I wondered if it was his voice or not.
The second and third movies, he was singing. He was singing,
Okay.
and he could sing in the first one, but I don't remember the exact reasons. But no, it was actually
I know
somebody.
Vanessa sang.
Yes,
Yeah.
but for some reason, it was that first movie. It wasn't actually his voice.
Got
They
you.
had a different
I thought
voice.
that was his voice.
Yeah. But it
also
sounds
was in
familiar
elementary
enough.
school.
That's the thing. Like you listen to the second and third one, it sounds similar enough.
to
I
it.
don't remember the exact reason.
Reason why? Yeah.
But I just know that.
But anyways, yeah. You know, I love to sing. I love music. So I was like, the guy that could sing, oh, I want that. But that I was in elementary school, so. But yeah. So I guess just watching that and seeing watching a relationship kind of unfold, really, but
it was the story.
Yeah,
it was the story and the narrative
beautiful.
that was put in front of you.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's it for me.
It seems like for most of us, I was saying like there are stories, like we kind of build stories around people, when we have crushes on them. But it seems like for most of us, like it was either because we had a crush on them, either because we saw something in them that we liked, or that there was a story or like that really kind of attracted us to them naturally, or it was proximity and consistency. And I actually really like that because I never thought about that before when it comes to crushes. It's like, yeah, you're around these people like not 24/7, but like half of the day, especially if you're in
8
school.
hours a day, yeah.
You're going to have a crush on somebody, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing I want to ask next is, when did you guys meet and choose your first friend?
Meet and choose our first friend? Ooh. The first time that I was in an environment but had to choose somebody for myself was when I was in elementary school, fourth and fifth grade. I went to a private school, had a very bad experience. First time I really was bullied and kind of ostracized and excluded from, being just a kid. Back in my day, it was not cool to like comic books, and it was not cool to be a nerd. Now it's cool to be a nerd.
It absolutely
I'm
jealous.
I'm kind of mad about it.
Absolutely.
Because people you have all these kids who are like bullies who think that it's cool to I'm like, no. We get the superheroes, all right? The ostracized kids, we get D&D, all right? Like we get Dungeons and Dragons, we get the nerd stuff. But so when I was a kid, I was bullied a lot for liking all these things. I was big into Avatar: Last Airbender. That was when it was coming out, just come out. At that time, I was in fourth grade. The show had just come out. It was totally amazing. So I was getting bullied a lot. And this one kid named TJ, he was in my class. And we also were going through the very same thing. And so we became really close friends for fourth and fifth grade because we connected on the fact of we accepted one another in the midst of being excluded from other people. We were comfortable still like playing Jedi and we would draw little comics about Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we would pass them back and forth, and we would take a comic and we would add to it and pass it back and forth to each other. And so for me, it was the first time I think that I would define that as like time I really chose a friend for myself. It was because of being ostracized or being excluded and choosing someone who would accept me. And I think that's another way that people would probably choose friends.
So for me, I would say, elementary school, I feel like every grade level that I went up, I get a new best friend. So whatever class that was, I had a best friend in that class. So, being a girly girl, we always bonded over dolls and baby dolls and like Disney Channel, all the, fun shows and stuff like that. So making friends was not hard for me at all. I was a friendly kid, and also I just loved like bonding with people, and I bonded with people quickly. Even a girl that was like low-key my bully became my best friend. It was so weird. So like she kind of like bullied me a little bit, but like we end up like connecting, and I guess she just saw how nice I was and just kind of folded and was just like, okay, we're friends now. Yeah. And so like she actually like became my friend, wildly enough. So yeah, it was, for me, a lot of the connection just came through us being able to relate to things. We like the same things, watch the same things, enjoy doing the same activities, going swimming and, playing different games and stuff like that. So that kind of is what built my bond to make friends initially. And it still kind of continues like that, but just in a deeper level. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. No, that makes me think about my friend Trey. He was a cool dude. He was a neighborhood kid, and we were both nerds, loved anime, loved Dragon Ball Z. I think Dragon Ball Z was like the foundation for a lot of friendships.
Yeah.
That and
Gundam.
Yep. This Toonami in general.
Toonami, yeah. Anything that came on Cartoon Network, which was the edgy kids channel.
Yep. Our Bugs Bunny. That's true. That's true. And so I, similar to all of you, I think about Trey and I'm like, why did I choose him to be my friend? Because I do think most of my friends in my life, even from a little kid till now, have been like chosen friends because me and my mom moved around so much. And so I remember him accepting me because I was also bullied. Naturally, most of us were bullied for like anime and all that stuff. And he completely accepted me for who I am. And I think even cooler is that his parents accepted me for who I am. Right. And so there was that closeness and proximity, but also it's like, yo, you can be a part of us and be a part of our family. Our house is open to you. Our snacks and food is open to you, and that's like a really cool thing. So I think for me, that was what attracted me to Trey, was also not just his kindness, but also his parents' kindness.
Yeah.
I want to ask you all, like, how did that change as you guys got older, right? So like, as you start to meet more people and, in middle school, high school, and even college, like, how did those sort of desires for friendship change? What drew you to people change? Even thinking about relationships too, like, how did that change? From like a summer crush to like, I want to date this person and spend money on them.
The money part, for real.
Yeah. So just how did that change as we got older and how that evolved? Mm-hmm. I think it manifests in similar ways. Mm-hmm. So I think of, so the next year when I was in like 5th grade, I think about the kid who was like my best friend at the time. He was a neighborhood kid. His name was Bry. It was like his middle name, or I think it was like just a nickname. But it was all my friendships as I got older were revolved around, is this someone who will accept me or reject me? Mm-hmm. Is this a person who shares, is shared interests? Sure. But shared interests because of what is the likelihood that they'll hurt me? What is the likelihood that we will just get along and we'll have a great time? And, you know, and I think about my friend Bri, and I think about going up through middle and high school, and the friends that I connected most with were the friends that it was just really about damage assessment. Like, it was about, what is the likelihood that you're actually going to hurt me? Or what is the likelihood that you're going to breathe life into me? You keep the friends that speak life into you. You keep the friends that are encouraging and comforting to be around. And you accept those who you also are looking for that, you know? People look for that in you. You look for that in others. And so, yeah.
So unknowingly, you're kind of looking for people, even if you may not know the spiritual language about this, but you're looking for people who produce good fruit.
Yeah.
And are willing to give that to you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's real.
Yeah, that's good. What else? They're not even married. They're already
right.
Oh, this is an everyday thing, y'all. So for me, how friendships, relationships have evolved or grown as I've gotten older is really just me being able to not necessarily all about like relatability, like, oh, we have this in common, we have that in common. It's more about like, how can we serve each other? Like, how can we love on each other? And a lot of it has to do with proximity. Yes, for me it is. So, you know, like I said, I work a 9 to 5. So the people I'm with for 9 hours a day, basically, I mean, I'm with them 40 hours a week. And so you know, naturally, some people don't, but naturally for me, I just bond with people, you know, whether I can relate to you or not. And I do that really just by getting to know people and just talking to them and getting to know their story, them knowing my story. And so a big part of how I've grown or started to develop relationships now is just being open to hearing people's story and just being an ear, and also being willing to share your story. And maybe we'll find some things in common there, or maybe we won't, but being open to that either way. And so not necessarily looking for like, okay, you know, oh, we have the same color skin, or, oh, you know, we wear the same type of, or we have the same type of style, fashion style, or whatever. Like, it's just more just off of the like, hey, we sit by each other at work every day. Like, what's your name? What do you like to do? Da, 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 da. And then just goes from there, and just building relationship, just getting to know people. So I feel like that's been the biggest thing for me. It's just being open to that.
So it's still that closeness and proximity.
Right,
that
for sure.
we talked about with our summer crushes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Proximity is a big, big, big thing for me. So, and it's not hard for me to make friends. So I can talk to anybody, but it's just being open to like actually connecting with people. Because it's like, I can sit by somebody 8 hours a day and they not really want to talk to me.
Yeah.
And if you show any type of disinterest, then I'm not going to force that on you.
Fair.
So it's like, you know, we can be in the same, you know, department, but actually not really know each other. We just, hey, good morning. How you doing? All right, bye. So like, you know, but for me, naturally, I just want to get to know people, and if they're willing and open to that. So yeah.
Yeah.
I necessarily don't, I guess, like, think about it as much, because I'm always quick to, you know, just make the assessments. If it happens organically, then fine. But it's more the basis of intentionality and surrounding myself with people that don't want a darn thing from me. So, like, having someone that does not have a hidden agenda, so that way it opens you up for both of y'all to serve and sacrifice. And just the intentionality part, just knowing, you know, just getting to know if that person is high maintenance or low maintenance. I'm typically more on like the medium or low maintenance like type, because like I have to do better about being intentional about like reaching out to like strong friends and all that kind of stuff. But just being in, friendships with people that don't make you feel that bad if you don't reach out as often as they would like. And I think people that do have that type kind of like, oh, they're not my friend because they don't reach out as much as they should, or X, Y, and Z. Then those are the people that actually want something from you, not necessarily like money or anything, but they want your time and affection and stuff. So they're wanting you to feel a certain insecurity or something. So I feel like surrounding yourself with people that actually are either open and vulnerable, like where they're at, and they're fine with being in solitude with the Lord, or they don't believe in the Lord. They are fine with being in solitude with, I guess, whatever they believe in. But then also finding people. I like having people around me. Some of that are similar, but some of that is like different, because I don't necessarily think I've been around or made friends with people that are completely different than me, where we don't have anything in common. I kind of say those are more like associates to me. But there are some people that at least we just have that one or two thing in common, and everything else that we don't have in common. At least we can, talk about those things, and I'm just interested to know, like, about where they are. And it's also about being interested in what they're interested in as well. So, yeah.
Well, I think you made an interesting point to touch on, where, when you're making friends, you're asking what's their agenda? What do they want from me? Because oftentimes we may pick friends based on things that we want.
Yeah.
So, I think about what is it that you want from somebody? I think there's a couple different types of friendships that I had. Some people that I gravitated towards because we had similar interests. And so what I wanted from you was acceptance and fear and removal of the fear of being rejected. So I wanted the space of the comfortability, right? But then you may choose other friends. Like I remember I've chosen very specific friends without realizing it until, afterwards. But I've chosen friends because I perceived them as having a higher popularity. And I granted, I love them as people. Like at the time it was like, I just wanted to be around you, but it wasn't until after the fact that I also realized that part of it is I just wanted to also be associated with something that I didn't have. Or at least I didn't feel like I had. And so I become friends with somebody because I feel like there's something that I'm missing that you have that I want. Or at least that I want to have in my life. Maybe not take from you, but to also have in my life. And something that, like you said, an experience that you have that I have, that I want to have. So
That's good.
Oh, and I was going to say, someone that doesn't want a thing from you, but also wants to see you win. Like both of y'all want to see each other win. And just as he was just talking, just surrounding yourself with people that's just gonna, good for your mental health. Cause I think we took a poetry class and one of the poets had talked about a friend that got a little bit too possessive and was wanting a hard time and stuff like that. So you just have to be, careful, because, there's broken souls out there. They'll cling and gravitate to, anyone that gives them affection and good things in their life, because their life is so dark.
All of you brought up the fact that, like, as we're growing up from like these cute kids who are like have these like summer crushes, and we're like admiring them from afar because they look cool or they can sing or whatever. It gets more complex as we get older naturally, but it also gets darker. It gets scarier, right? To be vulnerable, to choose friendships. You become more discerning, hopefully, right? Or if you aren't discerning, you actually learn to discern, right? But I think in most of the things that you all said, there was this sense of, I want someone who will accept me for me and not try to take from me. right? Not try to hurt me, right? And I want to kind of dive into that, right? Relationship, as we get older, is almost like it's a high stakes game in some sense, right? Where we all want to win, right? We want to be with the people who are popular, right? And have power and prestige and influence. And at the same time, we want people who accept us for our whole self, right? Sometimes those two things don't mix, which is okay. I want to ask you all, right? As you kind of grew and as you were growing into friendships and relationships, this is a deep question. What were the low points? And how did it impact you? I can actually start.
Yeah, go for it.
So I remember for 3 years I was depressed, like incredibly depressed, same rumination, depressed and anxious at the same time. It was quite the combo. And I woke up with the same thought all the time. And I remember searching for friends and choosing friends who I think really had beautiful hearts, and wanting a lot from them, right? And it got to the point where two of my friends eventually just stopped talking to me, right? It was the first time I actually had ever lost friends. And I was like, and at first I was like, yo, is it, I felt ostracized, actually. I felt outcasted because I was like, they don't want to be my friends because I'm depressed, because I'm going through this really hard thing in my life and they can't be supportive, right? And it made me, for a while, very, very careful about who I let into my life, right? And also it made me very protective, right? And I would say the same thing happened with our common thing. We used to serve at a church together. And again, there was that kind of like, there was someone that you really looked up to and that you hoped would, be the person you thought they would be, and then they weren't, right? And then you kind of go back into your shell, right? And I'm sure many of you have probably felt that when you've gone to churches, or maybe with your parents or with your other friends in your lives, spiritual leaders, where you thought they were going to be something, and maybe they were that thing for a season, and then they just stopped, and you felt abandoned, right? I went through that, and it deeply changed me for a while until something happened, and I'll save that for later. So that was my low point, is just losing friends while I was in this dark space.
So for me, a lot of my friends that over time, it was more so I've never left or lost any friends because of something negative, or something like where we parted ways because maybe we didn't get along anymore, or we didn't have the same ideologies, or whatever that may be. But for me, it was just more of the slow drift. And that's typically just because of location, where we are in life. You graduate high school, going to different college than your friends, and you talk a little bit as you're at freshman year, top of freshman year, and then just over time, just slowly drifting. And I see that progressive movement in every one of my, like, from middle school to high school, from high school to college, from college to adulting, whatever you want to call it. You're adult in college, but like from all of those stages, you just watch. I've seen a gradual drift just to friendships, and a lot of that has to do with just not talking anymore, not reaching out as much, or bits and pieces, or the reach out is like, hey, happy birthday, or Merry Christmas, Happy Easter, and that's pretty much all you hear from them, and then eventually that fades. So it's just that, like, losing that closeness with that person, and not being able to be around them, see them, and just really not being intentional, neither party, so me or the friend, being intentional about connecting and staying connected and communicating. So in a sense of it being a low point, in the moment it was a low point, but I mean, I'm just a big believer that everything happens for a reason. So in the moment when I'm going through it, I'm like, dang, I haven't talked to so-and-so in like 3 years. I don't even know what their life is like anymore. You know what I mean? I don't even know if they're the same person or they even live in the same state anymore. They probably may be living in another country possibly, and you know, it's just losing that even motivation to be intentional, you know? So it's just like, well, if they're living their own life now, I'm living my life now, so I guess we just part ways. But just, you know, realizing that over time, that does happen with some relationships. Some relationships are connected together like glue, no matter what, but some aren't, and being okay with that. So, yeah.
When I was a junior going into senior year of high school, our high school ministry, we had a huge shift because of some transitions in leadership with our youth pastor and stuff like that. And we had grown our student ministry for really quickly. Like in the course of about a year and a half, we had gone from 50 high schoolers to 500 high schoolers. And that was because of just evangelism and discipleship. And we had been discipled, and us as students, we're just on fire for Jesus, and we're just going out and ministry. And we just kind of had this movemental, explosive thing. And then just out of nowhere, the rug got swept out from under us. And so in the midst of that kind of crisis, a lot of students started leaving. Adults were kind of paralyzed with what do we do, yada, yada, yada. And I was, at that point, was kind of in charge of all of our student leaders, and I was very involved. I was a homeschool kid by this point. And so after, fourth and fifth grade, I was in private school, but went back to being homeschooled. So I had all the time. So a lot of my time was spent with our youth pastor. And so when that transition happened, I ended up stepping in and filling in a lot of these pastoral leadership roles. So I was teaching regularly. I was ministering to our students. I was taking students out to coffee all the time. I was, for lack of better words, I was the unofficial youth pastor. And that's why even till this day, a lot of the adult staff and other pastoral staff that were there, that are still there at that church, still refer to me as I was one of the youth pastors, even though I wasn't a paid staff member. I didn't, any of that stuff, but I fulfilled those roles. I sacrificed a high school experience. I don't know what it was like to be a high school kid. My whole years were ministry all the time. So literally, like, some of my friends, if they're going off, they're going to parties, they're doing these things. My life was literally work at our local church, coming in, working, helping out with the adult staff, working, trying to figure out areas that need help, areas that need fixed. Because it wasn't just our student ministry, but I also go help with like the younger kids as well, because there's holes that were filled that needed filling there. Worship leading here, worship leading there, speaking here, speaking there. And then also outside of that, guest speaking at local FCAs. And then on top of that, I had other ministries that I was helping. There, an independent organization that was like a retreat called Vida Nueva. So it's a young adult, the whole nother thing. But so like for my summer, for example, like I was going out and helping them. I was traveling to different states and speaking at these different camps for that, to the point that then we would plant one of those camps in Jamaica. Like, for like one summer, we'd go to Jamaica for like 2 weeks and we'd plant one of these camps out there. So like my whole world, it was hard because for my peers my age, I didn't have a high school experience. I at some level I just felt out of place, because with these experiences, they're having a high school experience. I'm not. I sacrificed that, but I wanted to do that, But at the same time, the adult relationships, they have kids. So I feel like the people that could relate to me on the questions that I had as a leader, and having, wrestling with some of these Bible questions, I'm trying to teach these things and trying to study scripture. I mean, I was reading scripture literally every day. By the time I graduated high school, I had read the Bible cover to cover 7 times. Like because I had all this responsibility that was put on me, and I wanted to rise to that occasion. I wanted to know that I was very adamant about, like, I don't care how old I am, I will do this just as good as the guy before me, regardless of how old I am. So I was adamant about studying, reading, getting it all right, putting it together. So I had all these questions, all this knowledge, all this stuff. And the people that I felt like I could relate to on a spiritual level, who could wrestle with those questions, they had their own lives, they had their own kids, they were older than me. And my peers, we could talk about that, but at some level, you can't connect fully. Mm-hmm. So it was a very lonely time within that, and that was something I still struggle with to this day, and still trying to almost recover from in my own way, and how that affected me later in life, even when I went to college and all that stuff.
Yeah. Caleb, man, thank you for sharing that. I actually want to highlight what you said about loneliness. I believe there have been studies consistently showing that in this moment in time, this generation of people are some of the loneliest people on the planet, right? And when I've heard you all talk, for you, Liv, I wonder, like, as people drifted out, that created a gap in your life, right? Those friendships, and there was a lack of affection there. And so we want to fill in those gaps, right? And sometimes that leads to us doing really toxic things like befriending people or dating people that we should not be dating or we should not befriend.
Story of my life.
But at the same time, when I hear your stories and what we've been talking about, I could assume that relationship is foundationally important for all of you. Back to that topic of loneliness, right? God said in Genesis, and actually you can correct me if I'm wrong, up until that point, everything that he created was good.
Mm-hmm.
And then God says something very interesting. After he made Adam, and Adam named all of the animals and did all the nomenclature, all that cool stuff. And God paused for a moment and he said, it is not good for man or humans to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time he said something was not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's super important. I want to dive into that today, right? This topic of being separated or isolated or lonely, right? Because we want something to fill in that gap. We search for affection all the time. And God clearly created us to be in community with one another. He's even in community with himself, right? As a triune God. So it's a part of us. Relationship is a part of who we are. God created Eve to solve that issue, right? To give him a companion that had proximity to him.
Yeah.
Right? Because God was in heaven. And so someone was on earth, right? And God clearly is everywhere, but there was a physical person on earth who was constantly with him. Eve gave him that closeness, right? They had similarities. They both had flesh. They both looked similar.
Flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone.
All the things we've been talking about when it comes to our crushes, all the way to our friendships, were present in that relationship with Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Right? So it's funny that stuff shows up even in pre-K.
Yeah.
Right? That type of yearning, right, comes out. And so they're getting along just fine. They're doing their thing. And then something happens. Someone comes along. Who's that person or being?
The serpent.
The serpent.
Yeah.
And what does the serpent want to do according to Jesus?
Wants to distort. Or to deceive.
Deceive. Right? And so he goes to Eve and he says, he tells her a half truth, right? And in some sense, this is a relationship that's being built, right? And sometimes we have those relationships too. And he tells her, God said, I truly tell you, right? If you touch and eat of the tree, or was it touch the tree?
Let's find out what somebody wrote thousands of years ago. The serpent was the shrewdest of all, or the cleverest of all the wild animals and the Lord had made. One day he asked the woman, did God really say you must not eat the fruit from any of the trees in the garden? And then, of course, we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden. The woman replied, it's only the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden that we are not allowed to eat. God said you must not eat it or even touch it. If you do, you will die.
So if you guys remember, of course, when God created the heavens and the earth, he created earth. He placed two trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. And he said, do not eat of the tree of knowledge, because if you do, you shall surely die. So Eve is now in conversation, really building a relationship with the serpent. And she's saying, well, we can't eat or touch, right, the tree. And God never said that, right? And so the enemy, or the serpent, right, jumps in on this and says, right, let's go to that. What does he say in response to her?
I will tell you. You won't die, the serpent replied to the woman. God knows that your eyes will be opened as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing both good and evil. Would you like me to keep going there?
We'll pause right
Okay.
there. So I think about what you said, Caleb, about wanting to be close to people that were popular, that had influence. You want to be like them, right? And I think about relationship. A lot of the times we get into a relationship with people because we want to be like them. Real fast forward, and it makes sense, right? That Eve is like, well, I want to be like God. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be like God, so let me do it, right? Let me actually get closer to God by eating this fruit. And then she does, right? Everything is okay for now. And then she says to her best friend, right, on the planet, Adam, hey,
He was,
eat this
fruit.
fruit.
I mean, he was standing right there,
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. That's what people don't understand. He was literally right there the whole time. Even though the dialogue records the serpent and Eve, it literally says, then she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it too. But interestingly enough, also to kind of add on to what you're talking about, so when the serpent says you'll be like God, knowing both good and evil, it says the woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted the wisdom that it would give her. So Proverbs chapter 4, there's this theme of wisdom is tied with trees. In Proverbs chapter 4, it says wisdom is like a tree of life. And so it creates this theme, this idea that these trees, they represent wisdom. But within that, what is wisdom? It's applied knowledge. But wisdom, what does that mean? It means control. Whose control do you want? Your control or God's control? And that, I think, plays a role within this as well.
And so after they eat, we know the story. We have the introduction of sin into the world, right? What does that sin do? What's the impact of them eating the fruit?
Death.
Death.
Yep.
Death.
Because we see that, that's why the very next story in this is Cain and Abel.
But what's the impact of sin on the relationship of Adam and Eve?
Yeah. Or it's the desire for control. It's to have dominion over one another, just to control each other. And it creates this shift, this separation that is symbolized. The Adam and Eve are not just representations of the first humans. They were also symbolic to the representation of heaven and earth, or at least them in their relationship with God. So God obviously being the realm of heaven, and the people, represent the realm of earth. And that's why the humans were the last ones that were created. So in the very last thing that is then spoken on that creation account is the two will become one. And that's where it's not just about man and wife. It's about literally heaven and earth that come together. That's why the word Eden and Garden of Eden means pleasure. So it's literally the honeymoon suite of creation. And so these two things come together, and then evil enters the world, separates and it separates everything: heaven and earth, God and humanity, and even, man and his wife.
There's this quote from The Chosen where Jesus meets,
What's The Chosen?
The Chosen is a TV series about the life of Jesus and his disciples or apostles. And he's talking with one of the antagonists in the show, and Jesus looks at him and says, "You've lost something." Right? And I think about that in this moment. They've lost something. All the things we've talked about, proximity, closeness, consistency, is lost in a moment between man and God, right? And what we see is that's lost between Eve and Adam to a certain point, because God comes to the garden, because after they eat, they realize they're naked, they go hide, and he asks them, where are you? And of course they respond saying, like we're naked. And so, we're hiding. And God, of course, says, why, how did you know? How do you know? And then
did you eat of the fruit I told you not to eat from?
Right? And then it goes to a blame game.
Yeah.
Because Adam, remember, this is the person God made to answer something that was not good. Right? And he looks at that person and says, she did it. Right? He takes away full accountability for himself and places it on her. And now that creates a distrust.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a brokenness there too. So there's a brokenness now between man and God, and there's a brokenness between what we see between Eve and Adam. And I actually want to talk about that now, right? Because we've talked about low points in our relationships with our friends, right? Where we felt that brokenness too, and that lack of closeness, right? And we've done things to try to fill in that gap, but they were unsuccessful, right? I tried to bring in friends to help me with my depression, unsuccessful. You were trying to do things to bring in people into your life, be close to certain people, unsuccessful. You were trying to buy affection, unsuccessful, right? Which is why we came to these points where it's like, oh, well, no, I just want someone in my life who loves me for me.
Yeah.
Right? Now, there's this gap. And there's a gap that's created between man and heaven, between God and man, when we sin. Who's the person that fills in that gap?
Between God and,
Who's the person that came in to fill in the gap between God and man?
Jesus.
A lot of us, and I wonder if this is going on with you guys today, is if you're going through depression, you're going through anxiety, you feel alone, you feel isolated, you are afraid of being vulnerable, right?
Make sure you're talking like.
Oh.
So when you're turning, when you do like this, it's not going to pick it up.
If you're afraid of being vulnerable, you might be looking for something to fill in the gap. I know it took a while for us to get here, but I want to talk about why Jesus is that person that can fill in that gap. He's that friend, right, that we're looking for. Because all of us talked about the friend we were looking for to fill in that gap of loneliness. And those points where our relationships with man got to a low point and we felt like we had nothing, and we start to go towards looking for other things, trying to discover other things. It was really God, right, that we were looking for. But we still have this issue of sin, right? And so we need an answer. That answer is Jesus. And I kind of want to ask you all, when it comes to Jesus, knowing that he's that answer to the gap between God and man, right? And we know that he laid down his life so that we could come back into relationship with God, and that one day in the future, heaven and earth will become one again, right? We'll have that proximity. We'll have that consistency. We'll have that closeness, right? We'll have that desire, right? For God, for one another. I want to ask you all, though, how did you get to a point where you started to engage Jesus and recognize that, oh, this is the person I was looking for? It wasn't a human being. It was actually Jesus.
Yeah. That's good. Start on the last.
So for me, I will say that when I got to that place was really probably end of high school, early college, so freshman year. That's when I really started to realize that the peace and the joy and the like fulfillment that you feel and long for, like no person can give you that. Not even the person that, quote unquote, will be the closest intimately you would be with, which would be your boyfriend or girlfriend, significant other. even that person, they can't fulfill every longing and desire, or just even that feeling of being fully accepted as yourself. That was outside of, even family can't provide that for you. And so when I really started to go deeper in which I already had a relationship with the Lord, but when I started to come to that realization, I started to seek and search the Lord in a more intentional and deeper way. And through that searching and through that depth of wanting to know more, that's when I found like Jesus for myself. And then finding Jesus for myself, I found that he is the only one that can fulfill every desire and that longing for true acceptance. He's the only one that you can be truly your authentic, vulnerable self with and feel no shame, feel no guilt, feel no like loneliness in the sense of, they'll reject me and they won't want to be near me once they know that, this about me or whatever that may be. So when I found that for myself, in that time, it changed the game for me. It even changed how I saw relationships, how I viewed relationships, and how I treated relationships as well. It changed my whole perspective, and it helped me to see, people for who they really are, and not in a negative way, but it helped me to see like, man, like Jesus is literally the only one that can fill in where man cannot even touch. And when I learned that, I cling to him more, which allowed me to not only love him more, but help me to love other people more. So, yeah.
So I don't know if this is the correct answer, but necessary. I just isolated myself, and I just knew that I just stepped back and just isolated and stayed in solitude. And also, obviously, the tension and things I would seek from people, I was seeking from other things. So necessarily, I knew, because I'm a PK, so I knew the knowledge of that. But I guess to know it is a different thing intellectually than actually to like fully embrace it, because my struggles or relational issues I've ever had with God or Jesus is always tied to the men that I look to in my family or in my life in general. So it's always been something that's always ongoing, but to know like in my heart instead of my head as an intellectual is I believe just getting up here in Atlanta, maybe it was 2019, kind of right before the pandemic. Met someone that invited me back to their church because I was just longing to get back into church because I know I needed Jesus, but I wasn't necessarily looking for community because I've grown accustomed to just, being around associates and stuff like that. And I necessarily, that longing for being around people was being filled by something else. So I just was like, I'm cool. But I did want to know Lord more because still was yearning, because though I wasn't going to people, I was still going to substance or other things. So just being intrigued and just knowing and just following my heart and just being back in church, being back listening to a sermon and just being inspired, from my heart, just being able to be like, I want to follow this. And I guess even before that, my actions of that spoke to that. So some of the spontaneous trips to waterfalls and stuff I would do, it was heart provoked. So I wasn't necessarily it's a good and a bad thing. I necessarily wasn't thinking with my head. I was more so thinking with my heart, and was just like, this is what I want to do. So I'm going to go do it. So yeah, just when I realized it in my heart, it was around 2019. So yeah.
I would say for me, it was when I was in late middle school. I was struggling a lot with my ADD and this deep-rooted sense of loneliness had progressed to the point of like chronic depression and anxiety. And so when I was in middle school, I kind of went on this kind of intellectual crusade for truth, and I was kind of putting everything out on the table. I was like, okay, whatever is true is the winner, whether that's Jesus or not. And so I was reading into Buddhist texts. I was reading into is the Quran, Islam. I was reading atheist tech books, and I was watching videos from everything. I was looking everywhere. And eventually, it was this search for purpose, but it was this search for what's real. And I think I needed to see truth come alive. I needed to see the fruit of that truth come alive. And so, watching different things, reading a bunch of different things, meeting different people, constantly having conversations with people. And eventually it brought me full circle back to Jesus when I actually got to see it come alive. And I had this little nudge that just, excuse me, what was that? I had this little nudge that just reminded me that if God is real, that means the enemy is real. And he'll do whatever it takes to isolate you and to put you in a place of loneliness. He'll want you to sit in your isolation, your loneliness. The enemy wants you to just figure it out all by yourself, wants you to be the strong one who doesn't need any help from anyone, so that you can become overwhelmed, so that it will be too difficult for you to figure out, that it'll be too heavy for you to process on your own, so that you'll then drop it and leave it all together. And so in the midst of that, realizing that, I saw it as almost like a chess game. And I had to say, all right, what's my move to counteract that strategy? And so I dove back into to scripture for the first time in a long time, and was just reading, and just read the whole thing and got to just see that and its narrative. But then I got to, in the midst of that season, was when my youth pastor discipled me, and we got to literally see it come alive in person, and we got to see people's lives being changed. Went out and not just through testimonies, not just through people giving their life to Christ, but then through miracles happening before our eyes, and literally seeing that come alive. And it was not about the miracles or the things that were happening. It was about the realization that you're not a nobody. You may be ordinary, but God will do extraordinary things through you. And seeing that in front of me, seeing that it's not seeing other people do it, but going and doing it yourself and being the hands and feet of Jesus. That was where it all filled in the gap, because it wasn't just something that you thought about or talked about. It was a true interactive experience where you were the hands and feet of Jesus. You were the one who got to experience. You got to see it come alive, and you just had to trust, and you saw the Holy Spirit do through you what is literally impossible through your own strength. So, yeah.
So you all had very wonderful moments where you were able to kind of step into a relationship with God and then start to realize that he's the person to fill in that gap. I want to point out this. We know that the serpent's main goal was to isolate humanity from God, right? He knew, or it knew, that sin would isolate man from God, right? And you talked about that the main point of the enemy is to isolate us from one another. I want to ask you all this one more thing, and then we'll wrap it up. Adam and Eve, when they sinned and they ate from the tree, that was their lowest point in their relationship with God. But it was also one of the highest points at the same time. And we see that a lot throughout the Bible, right? A person's lowest point with God becomes their highest, right? So I want to ask you all, and we know that sin can do that, right? I think you wrote in in Simply Love Jesus chapter 2 there. Like, sin is like cheating on God.
Yeah,
right?
sin is the equivalent of cheating on a relationship with God.
Right. Which is true. And we all, like, when we sin in our friendships and relationships, we talked about those low points, that drifting away sometimes is a lot of times caused by that sin, right? Whether it's my me-focused nature, whether it's drawing away, whether it's wanting to use somebody or allowing ourselves to be used, right? So that we could feel valuable, which is in some ways a form of pride.
Yeah.
Right. And it causes issues. It causes isolation in the end because it doesn't produce any good fruit. So I want to ask you all, did you all have a low point with Jesus? And if you did, how did you get back to him? So there was a point where 10 years, well, for almost 10 years, I was kind of running away from like my pastoral calling and all these things. And I was living my life to the fullest. And I got to a point where I hit this rock bottom.
Yeah.
After being suicidal and all these things, I remember I went to a Catholic church. I went through RCIA and went to confirmation, and we did this thing called Examine. And Examine is really where you just go out into nature, you get this scripture, and you kind of look at it, and you're supposed to talk with God. And I remember I told God, I said, this is your last time. I said, I'm going to ask you to do a few things, and if you don't, I'm good. Right? Because at that point, I was at the end of my rope, and I said, God, lead me to a hill where I can be isolated and I can just talk to you freely. And he said, go here. And we were on the Boston College campus. So he led me to this hill, and it was actually legitimately isolated. And I sat down and I looked at the scripture, and I was like, God, this isn't speaking to me. And I said, what do I do? The wind flipped over and turned the paper over. Kind of like saying, like, don't focus on that.
Yeah.
And then immediately I saw all the times I had been hospitalized. Because throughout those 3 years, I kept on telling God, you hate me. I said, you hate me. You can't love me. I said, if you're not willing to take my life, especially knowing that I'm going through these things, how could you love me? So I'm disparaging his character the entire time for those 3 years. And I see this vision, and I see God's right hand holding my hand. And all I hear is, I'm your friend.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my entire life, I realized Jesus is my friend. And he was my friend before I was his friend. Even he was my friend when I was his enemy. Right? And so that was my low point, but it was also the high point.
Yeah.
Because that's what jump-started my relationship with God.
So I'll say for me, my low point, I don't have like a dramatically low point, but just points in my walk where I started to question God a lot and like, are you real? Is this real? Like, is there really a heaven and hell? Is there really, are you really in control of what's going on here? Or like what? All these questions, and a lot of this happened in college for me, but I think one of the moments was probably sophomore year of college. I was very much involved at my campus ministry at the time, and I was becoming more involved as like in student leaders is what we called them. So it was in that time where I was really struggling with the idea of like true worship, or what is worship? Like, what is being free in worship? Like, I always, up until then, I know it's kind of bad theology, but I thought worship was singing, singing in church on Sunday. I didn't know it was like a lifestyle or how you live. Every day of your life is worship. And I was wrestling with that truth because I'm like, okay, well, how am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to, what deems me as worshiping you and what deems me as not worshiping you? And, how is worshiping you even fulfilling for me? Like, what does that do for me? And I felt like the Lord was really calling me to like deeper intimacy with him. Like you said, in a sense of like a friendship, like a friend, like you would get to know a friend, like you would build a relationship with a friend for the first time, or for the, maybe you haven't been with each other in a long time and you reconnecting, rebuilding that relationship. And I honestly felt like the Spirit of the Lord, and this was actually through worship, like actual music worship, but this was through that was when I encountered the Lord, with all the questions, all the doubts, still kind of lingering, still trying to process through these things. That was the first time where I felt like I really like heard from the Lord, in the sense of like, not the audible voice, but the sense of like, it's okay. Like, I'm okay with your questions. Just come to me, like, just be with me. And that was where I started to really grow in learning and being discipled in like what being in true intimate relationship with the Lord is. Not going to church on Sunday, not going to Bible studies on Wednesdays, or singing all the right songs, or praying the right prayers, and reading, a chapter a day keeps the devil away, or, a verse a day, or whatever. Like, that's not what builds your intimacy with the Lord by itself. It's just authentically like you would with a friend. Hey, let's go hang out together. Let's just spend the day together. Let's go to a park or whatever. That's where that came alive for me. And when that came alive for me, it kind of dissipated all the doubts and the questions, not completely, but in the sense of like, oh, God just wants Jesus just wants a relationship with me. Just like I long for a relationship with people, with friends, with boyfriend, whatever. Like, he desires that with me, and he wants me to desire that with him. And that's where that desire began to grow a lot deeper. It was there, but the depth wasn't there. It was very surface level. So that deep intimacy, like vulnerability, telling the Lord how you really feel about something, because I was very fearful of that as well. Like, I'm not going to tell the Lord I'm angry, I'm pissed, I'm mad. Like, I'm not going to tell him that. But like being honest and like, Lord, I hate it here. This sucks. Like, life sucks right now. I hate school. I hate going to school. Like, all those things. And like being honest with the Lord about where I am, even spiritually. Like, Lord, I don't hear you like other people hear you. Like, they're talking about, I hear his voice. I hear his voice. I don't hear that. And so that's where the growth happened for me.
Yeah. So you were able to do something that Caleb couldn't do as a pastor in his church.
Yeah.
With Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something really important to highlight. Is like the space, sometimes we're looking for that space with human beings, but from your story, we can hear that we actually have that space with Christ.
Yeah. When I think about like my low moments with Jesus, I think they've come in different waves. And like what you've said, I think those worst moments become your catalytic moments. Because in each low place, I've taken away a valuable lesson. When I think about the real first time it happened was, in the midst of this crisis, having to step up and kind of be this youth pastor for our students and try to hold this kind of what felt like a crumbling ship, ship's falling apart. You're trying to hold everything together and working really hard for that. And it was not long after God had given me the vision for, Simply Love Jesus. Before that, it didn't have a name. It was just this thing that God had given me. And I was like, what is this? Like, what do I do with this? And it was at that time where it all kind of came to a head, and I was struggling. I was kind of at this pit of loneliness. I was struggling with a lot of things, and it was in the midst of all of that where you just felt totally isolated and alone, and like by the same time, it feels like the weight of the world's on your shoulders, that I really believe like God had spoken to me and just said that one phrase that continued to develop the rest of Simply Love Jesus. And I just heard God speak, and he said, the first step to simply loving Jesus is understanding that Jesus simply loves you. And when I wasn't able to accept that for myself, and I was able to recognize just how much Jesus loves me, and I was able to put my suffering in perspective to his suffering, and that continued to happen in multiple ways, but that was like the first time that really happened, is to be in that place of just isolation and loneliness, to be in that place of confusion and frustration, to be in that place where it all doesn't make sense, but at the same time you wonder if there's something wrong with you. And that's where Jesus met me. He said, like, the first step to simply loving Jesus is understanding that Jesus simply loves you. And then it just takes you on that spiral again, the idea of that question. And that question was put on my heart. And what does it mean to simply love Jesus? Every time I ask that, it takes me through that journey again. And that's why I inspire people to ask the same question, because when you ask that question, it puts you in the remembrance and the reminder of what Jesus did for you, how much he loves you, how much he endured, the suffering that he endured, also that you would understand how much God loves you. And that's what changed it all for me.
That's beautiful, bro. I actually think that's a perfect thing to kind of wrap up the conversation with. First, I want to say thank you for sharing your stories. I know this took a little bit longer, but part of me thinks it's because we had so much to share. And I can tell that there was some of the questions I asked, I think we haven't really thought about.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to think through, and that's important.
Yeah.
And I think there's not a lot of that's happening in our communities today. We're not engaging with each other in this way.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes it's okay if it goes a little bit long. Right. I want to encourage you all, as we close out, if you're lonely, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, to find community, right? To find friends. That's a part of us. We talked about how God said it's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for humans to be alone. We're supposed to be in community, right? Isolation, right, is a product of sin, right? But we know that Jesus came to lay down his life for us so that we could actually not be isolated, but so we could be in community with him, but also with one another in peace, right? Through the Holy Spirit, right? And so I want to encourage you all too, as you're finding friends, as you're trying to figure out community, also look for Jesus, chase after him. He's the one person, right? We've talked about friendships who sometimes end because we're looking for things that people can't give. Jesus can give those things. He's always present. He's always consistent. He's always in proximity, and he will never let us down. And also, I want to remind us of this. In our lowest moments, sometimes our human friends may leave us, and that breaks our heart. But Jesus is the one who stands with us in those moments, and he lifts us up and actually turns those moments into a catalyst for a more intimate relationship with him, right? And I think in those moments, when we experience that with him, we can bring that to other people, right? Talking about loving God and loving people, right? So I want to encourage you all to do that. And I want you all to, of course, engage with the questions that we asked today. We would love to hear what you all have to say. I think it's really important that we have these conversations, and also ask your friends these questions too. It may turn into an all-night conversation, but it's really important. So as I'm saying that, I want to encourage you guys to get onto our TikTok, to also hop onto our Facebook as well. Join our Facebook group. There's a new social media app called
Frequency. Yeah, we're still trying to nail down exactly where we're gonna put our online community. We're kind of testing a couple different spaces, but eventually we'll land it somewhere. But there's a couple different avenues that you can get involved. We have Frequency People is a network that we want to help grow. But also right now, there's also the option on our YouTube channel. There is just a community tab that you can just hit right there, and you can interact there as well. And so eventually we're going to really nail down where we're going to try to gather everybody, which will be important because in the fall, we're going to be launching our online groups. So we're going to be doing regular Bible studies, prayer gatherings. And so before that happens, we'll have a more firm answer for you guys. So, yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in, and God bless you. May He walk with you. And again, I pray that you all find a community that you're looking for, and I pray that you find community with us at SLJ.